Because Ronald Reagan was a staunch conservative and an anti-communist, it came as no surprise when he picked a hard-line Cold Warrior to run the CIA, and William Casey fit the bill. A veteran of the old school, he'd served in the OSS under Wild Bill Donovan during World War II. Casey had little but disdain for the new laws designed to keep a tight rein on the CIA's covert actions.
Casey was a close friend of Reagan's and indeed had been his national political campaign manager. So here's a DCI who had wonderful access to the White House, and you know, you can spend $30 billion a year and gather the best information in the world, and if you can't get it into the doors of the White House, it's useless.
As a result, the new CIA director went out of his way to advise the president, even to the point of helping him to shape foreign policy, especially when it came to fighting a deadly new kind of war. In 1983, a suicide bomber from Hezbollah pulled up over there in what was then the courtyard of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. His car bomb killed 63 people, including 17 Americans, and wounded over 100 more. It was the opening salvo in a war of terror. That blast wiped out the CIA's intelligence operation in Beirut. A CIA agent named William Buckley was sent in to rebuild the operation.
Once on the mean streets of Beirut, his real identity was soon learned, apparently. Within a year, March 1984, he had been kidnapped. From then until last year, when his captors made the gruesome claim he had been executed, authorities believe he was tortured and mistreated, and in the process forced to give up crucial secrets about intelligence contacts and U.S. counterterrorism tactics.
That tragedy only reinforced the Reagan administration's hardline rhetoric that it would never negotiate with terrorists for the release of hostages.
The United States gives terrorists no rewards and no guarantees. We make no concessions, we make no deals.
But the tough talk was empty talk, for behind the scenes the United States had agreed to sell weapons to Iran in exchange for its help in freeing the other American hostages in Lebanon. And when those weapon sales turned a profit, CIA Director Casey knew just where to spend the money. To help the rebel forces in Nicaragua, known as the Contras, in their fight to overthrow the left-leaning government of Daniel Ortega.
The little dictator who went to Moscow in his green fatigues to receive a bear hug didn't forsake the doctrine of Lenin when he returned to the West and appeared in a two-piece suit. He made his choice long ago. History will not wait on us.
Reagan viewed Ortega and the Sandinista government as the greatest threat to U.S. security within the Western Hemisphere since Fidel Castro's rise to power. Once again, the CIA was called on to lead the charge. CIA agents helped to train, arm, and supply the Contra forces. They even assisted in the mining of Nicaragua's harbors. The Congress was so alarmed that they outlawed any further aid to the Contras. The battle lines between the Congress and the CIA were drawn.
William Casey was asked the question, what do you think Congress's role is when it comes to intelligence? He said, the business of Congress is to stay out of my business.
But that simply did not happen. In the fall of 1986 came the first disclosures of the CIA's Iran-Contra scheme, and it wasn't long before the Reagan administration was rocked by the worst scandal to hit Washington since the Watergate affair.
A bombshell of a story at the White House today. 2 administration officials out. The revelation that the Iran arms deal helped funnel secret millions through Swiss banks to the Nicaraguan Contras. Today, the Reagan administration said perhaps $30 million from the secret sales was laundered through Swiss banks, then sent to the rebels in Central America. This may have been illegal. President Reagan says he was not informed, didn't know all that was going on.
A very active NSC officer convinced the CIA to do some things, not telling them all the implications of what they were doing.
That very active NSC officer was a decorated Vietnam veteran named Oliver North.
Who else in the government was aware of either the plan or the fact of using proceeds of arms sales to Iran for the Contras?
Director Casey knew. Director Casey used several words to describe how he felt about it, all of which were effusive. He referred to it as the ultimate irony, the ultimate covert operation kind of thing, and was very enthusiastic about it.
By the time North testified at the Iran-Contra hearings in 1987, Bill Casey was dead from a brain tumor. So, was Oliver North telling the truth about the late CIA director?
Given William Casey's general attitude toward, quote, the evil empire and his willingness to engage in all kinds of opportunities to thwart that empire, one would have to believe that Casey was very much in on all the Iran-Contra early planning. This is all circumstantial, but it's a very strong body of circumstantial evidence that leads one to believe that William Casey was lurking behind all aspects of the Iran-Contra affair.
The Reagan administration's goal in Nicaragua was finally achieved in 1990. Ironically, however, it was not the CIA that ousted Daniel Ortega from power, but the Nicaraguan people themselves in a free and open election. Yet by then, the world was caught up in an event of far greater consequence, the collapse of the communist bloc in Europe.
Berlin tonight is a city in a state of near delirium. West Berliners turned out in their thousands to greet their countrymen from the east who flocked across the now open Berlin Wall.
The crumbling of the Berlin Wall in 1989 was followed, less than 2 years later, by the breakup of the Soviet Union itself, and the downfall of communism in its most powerful citadel, Russia, finally brought an end to the Cold War.
On August 21st, 1991, the end to the communist, and I dare say even the Soviet era in Russian history. This is a true milestone.
The Soviet disintegration came so swiftly, so decisively, that it begged the question, had the CIA's vaunted intelligence system failed to detect the forces that were tearing apart America's most dangerous enemy? Or were the agency's senior officers pursuing a different agenda? Those questions came to a head during the 1991 confirmation hearings of Robert Gates, the top Soviet expert, and President Bush's nominee to run the CIA.
In explosive testimony, former CIA officials said Gates and his boss at the time, William Casey, never hesitated to slant intelligence reports to fit their own views.
But what I think is most important and most offensive is that Casey and Gates arrogated to themselves the power to make intelligence judgments, that they had contempt for a process designed to allow independent analysis.
It was a problem apparently well known throughout the intelligence community.
And so when these reports come out, the Soviet Union is in such trouble, they're going to have to reform. There's a tendency for Casey and Gates to reject this information and to send over to the White House information that they believe to be true.
As a result, some in Congress charged, the U.S. paid a heavy price for failing to send that information on to the President.
We had known how weak the Soviet economy was, or rather if the President had known, we wouldn't have quadrupled the national debt in the 1980s. We end up the Cold War a debtor nation, just as they end up a collapsed nation.
And then the CIA's integrity, already under fire, was tarnished further when Aldrich Ames was arrested for espionage in 1994.
Former CIA operations officer Aldrich Ames and his wife Rosario entered guilty pleas to conspiracy to commit espionage and tax fraud, thus ending the criminal prosecution in the most damaging spy case in the history of this country.
The Aldrich Ames case dealt a devastating blow to the reputation and integrity of the CIA, one from which the agency was still struggling to recover on the eve of its 50th anniversary in September of 1997. Some final thoughts on the CIA's past and future when the 20th century returns.